Hey, welcome to Live from Dennis's house. And today we have a departure from the norm. And as is the norm when you do groundbreaking television, it's very controversial, very shocking. And I believe this is where we're going to win our Pulitzer. Are you ready for all of that? And it's not for the squeamish, though. It's not for the faint of heart. So anybody out there with a heart condition, you must check with your doctor before you watch this episode, because today we are doing nothing but Charles Manson, and more Charles Manson. We're going to talk about Charles Milhouse Manson. Oh, no, it wasn't Milhouse. His middle name is Mills, surprisingly. It's not Milhouse,
He's not
though.
a Simpsons character.
Wasn't he originally Maddox as well?
He was no name Maddox
yes.
or something?
No name
Exactly,
Maddox.
because he was born November 12th, 1934 in Cincinnati, Ohio. His mother was Kathleen Maddox. His father, very questionable who he was, but the actual father's name was Colonel Scott. Yeah. The stepfather was William Manson, where he got his name. So, of course, his mother was, she had a problem. She was 16 when he was born. She was promiscuous, drunk, a prostitute. So he grew up with relatives in West Virginia while his mother was in prison. Mm-hmm. And his cousins and friends, they all said he was a bad seed from the earliest age. You could tell he was going to be trouble. But so he spent most of his life in juvenile detention centers in prison. By March 21st, 1967, his release day, he had spent more than half of his 32 years in prisons and other institutions. So while he was in jail, surprisingly, very shocking story, he learned how to play the guitar from Alvin Karpis, who is a famous bank robber who was in Ma Barker's gang. Wow. Mm-hmm. So there you go. And so he got out in March 67, Summer of Love. He went to San Francisco.
He actually begged them not to let him out.
Right, he did.
Because
I heard
he knew
that
he would not do good things. He was so assimilated to life on the inside.
Yeah,
he spent half his life in jail.
Half his life, so.
Yeah, he's like, I don't know what to do outside. Mm-hmm.
So that goes a lesson to all the jailers out there. If someone says they want to stay there,
let
them stay there.
Figure it out.
Yeah, so, and that was the perfect situation and place for him to be. Because, he's a career criminal. He's 32 years old. He's this hippie guy as well. But there's all these naive teenagers, runaways, misfits, all in San Francisco, ripe for the picking. Mm-hmm. He's a sociopath.
They're all on
and manipulator. Yeah, they're all on drugs. Yeah. And, so he just said, bam, this is my playground here. So does anybody know who the first member of the Manson family is? The first girl who he indoctrinated into the group?
Susan Atkins?
No, it was Mary Bruner.
Yeah.
I want to talk about how he got to know Dennis Wilson. That was a good story.
That's great.
That two of the family members, Patricia Krenwinkel and Ella Jo Bailey, were hitchhiking, and Dennis Wilson picked them up, right? And he brought them back to his house, and you know what rock stars do. Wink, wink.
They had a spot of tea and spoke about politics.
Yeah, so anyway, they left, and he went to the recording studio. He came back in the middle of the night, and there's the whole Manson family in his house. Charlie greets him at the door at like 3 o'clock in the morning, and Dennis Wilson's terrified. And he goes, "You're not going to hurt me, are you?" And there's a famous story that Manson bends down, he kisses his feet, and says, "No, of course not," So
they're like mice. You only see two, but there's more in the walls waiting to come out.
They're multiplying.
Exactly, yeah. So there's all these people in there. Him and Dennis Wilson become friends, and it ended up costing Dennis Wilson about $100,000. They said they smashed up his cars, all the drugs that he brought, and he paid for studio time for Manson and recorded a demo. And this was very important part of the story here, that Dennis Wilson introduced Manson to Greg Jacobson, Rudy Altobelli, and most importantly, Terry Melcher. Yep. So Terry Melcher, does anybody know who his mother was? Doris Day.
Wow.
Yes.
That I did not know.
Yes. So he was a very famous producer of the day, did Birds and many other bands in the 60s, right? So, and as I said, Charlie pictured himself as a rock star. He wanted to be a musician more than anything in the world. So, and, he was pretty good, too. So, anyway, one day, Dennis Wilson said, all right, I had enough of this, but he was afraid to kick them out of his house. So, he called his manager and said to throw him out, right? So, his manager threw him out while he was away. So, they all packed up and they moved to Spahn Ranch out in the desert. And, Manson was a pretty good musician at the time. Very famous people. Neil Young thought he was great.
Yeah.
Yes. Beach Boys recorded 2 of his songs. And at the same time, the White Album was released, and he became obsessed with it. And that's where he got this plan. Everybody knows what Helter Skelter plan was, right? He had this great dream of a race war, right? That the blacks and whites would fight, the blacks would win, and he'd be hiding in the desert. The blacks couldn't handle being on top, so they would call him out of the desert to rule the world. Seems like a reasonable plan. What could go wrong, right?
Well, there was that whole thing where he thought he had killed a black guy.
Right, I'm going to get to that. That's coming up next.
Yeah.
Yes. So, and like I always say, this all could have been avoided if Terry Melcher didn't reject him. Terry Melcher rejected him. Right, and that was that.
Well, and they would have never found the Tate house also if it hadn't been.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, because that's what they thought they were going to.
And that's one thing, too. They say that with his friends, they dropped Terry Melcher off, who was living at this Cielo Drive house with his girlfriend, Candace Bergen.
Yeah.
Right. So, and he was rude
Didn't know that
rude to Charlie and made him like go out the back door and stuff and wouldn't let him come in the house and all these things like this, you know? So there was a method to this why he picked that house. It wasn't just clear out of the blue. So then, as you mentioned, this is how it's, escalated. And after Terry Melcher rejected him, July 1st, 1969, Lots of Papa.
Yes,
that's the guy's name.
That was him.
Tex Watson ripped off this drug dealer named Bernard Lots of Papa Crow. I love that name. Yeah, I think I'm going to call me that from now on. That's my new
Call me
nickname.
Lots of Papa.
So Crow threatened to kill everybody at Spawn Ranch, wipe out the whole crew and stuff. So Manson, he struck first and beat him to the punch and shot him in his Hollywood apartment. And he thought he killed him. He saw it on the news.
There was a report of a dead Black Panther.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
that was the whole
so
thing.
he
Thought it was a
assumed-
Black Panther,
Yeah.
and that everybody went crazy.
And so they thought they were going to be attacked. So they had Spawn Ranch turned into an armed camp, night patrols and all of this.
Guns, yeah.
And Tex Watson later said in his book, he said, if we needed any more proof that Helter Skelter was coming down very soon, this was it. He said Blackie was trying to get at the chosen ones. That's the way they always spoke,
Paranoia always yields positive results and good things.
So then, July 25th, 1969, Bobby Beausoleil, Mary Bruna, and Susan Atkins, they went to Gary Hinman's house to get money, drugs, all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
He
had
said,
inheritance, apparently.
right, and he refused to give it to him, said he didn't have it, so they tied him up. Called Charlie, said, what should we do? He said, I'll be right over.
Brings a
He
sword.
came over with a sword,
Yeah.
chopped Gary Hinman's ear off, and said, all right, kill him.
Yeah.
They had him for like 3 days. Though.
Yes,
they had him like
yes.
full on hostage.
Tortured him.
Yeah, torturing him, beating the crap out of him.
Yeah.
So then they killed him.
Tex killed him, correct?
Yes,
Yeah.
and then I believe it was Susan who took the blood.
Imposter, wrote
And
it
she
on.
wrote "Political Piggy" on the wall.
Actually, I think Bobby did that.
And put a Black Panther paw print and put it on them, right?
Yeah, trying to misdirect the
And then
investigation.
a couple weeks later, August 6, 1969, Beausoleil was arrested driving Hinman's car with the murder weapon in the tire well. 2 days later...
He's a smart one. Whoops.
Yeah.
What could go wrong
Couldn't
with
even
that?
paint it stupid and clean it
Right,
out.
and you got to keep the murder weapon in the car.
That's where you want to keep it. You want to, don't make them look for it.
Yeah, right. So, anyway, after he was arrested, 2 days later, Manson told the family members, now is the time for Helter Skelter. Hey, welcome back live from Dennis's house. And now we're going to continue our saga of The Love and Terror Cult, starring Charles Manson and a cast of characters. So,
And a motley crew.
and it came to a head on August 9th, 1969. You know what happened that? The most famous murder of all time, I think. Manson directed Tex Watson to take Susan Atkins and Linda Kasabian and Patricia Krenwinkel to Terry Melcher's former house and kill everyone there, he said. He told the two women to do what Watson told them, and the family members proceeded to kill 5 people. So now the address of this house was 10,050 Cielo Drive, Los Angeles, California, which has been torn down since because
it was
of
a
all the
tourist
people.
attraction.
Right, exactly.
Oh, sure.
And Trent Reznor actually lived there for a while and recorded an album.
Oh,
there.
that's right.
Yeah. So the people killed were Sharon Tate, 8 months pregnant. Jay Sebring, he was the hairdresser to the stars. Wojtek Frykowski. Abigail.
Playboy.
Yes, very good.
Sorry.
I want to be called that too.
The Polish Playboy, lollipop,
lots of
whatever.
papa.
Lots of papa.
Lots
The
of
Polish
papa.
Playboy.
Yeah, Polish Playboy.
It's very literate.
Let's bring this in here. We're talking about mass murderer, and Sarah's making light of it.
Me! Just me!
Who's laughing his ass off?
See, now this could be taken the wrong way.
Look, lots of papa.
Let's go back here. We're talking about mass murder, but this is a comedy show. And it was a terrible event, tragic circumstances, but, it's been 47 years. So... I just got to say, some people say they love Manson. I think that's a very strong word to say that.
A little much.
You say fascinated. I've been fascinated with this since I was a toddler.
Me too.
And, so that's where we're going with this. There's no,
he's a horrible human being.
There's no love
It's
for
very
Manson
bad. He's
here.
very bad,
There's
man.
just interest in the story.
He's a bad man. Very bad man.
Very bad man.
Very bad.
So anyway, let me get back to this. Wojtek, Abigail Folger, the coffee empire heiress, and Steve Parent were in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Poor
Especially Steve
guy.
Parent.
Oh.
Yeah. So the way it went down, Tex Watson climbed over the fence, and he came across Steve Parent coming out of the driveway there. He was visiting his friend who lived in the back house. So Tex shot him, killed him, and the caretaker in the back room was William Garrettson.
Yeah, he's
we'll
the
discuss
only
him
one.
later. Yeah, we'll get back to him at the end here. But so then Tex cut a screen, went into the house, opened the front door, let Susan and Patricia in, and Linda Kasabian stood watch outside. And the first person they came across was Frykowski sleeping on the couch.
Well,
And
Abigail Folger saw them walk in the house and she waved at
Right,
them.
right,
She was
right.
reading a book on the bed.
I was
And
like,
she
oh,
thought,
hey.
they're just hippie kids.
there was so many
visiting,
people coming into the
out.
house,
Yeah.
so it's that. So then Tex came up to Frykowski. He woke up and he goes, "Who are you?" And Tex whispered these terrifying words, "I am the devil, and I'm here to do the devil's business."
Mm-hmm.
So then Atkins went, she rounded up the three others, brought them to the living room. They were tied up, and they threw the rope over the one of the rafters, right? And then Sebring protested and said, "She's pregnant, don't do this." Tex shot him. And then stabbed him 7 times. His hands, Frykowski's hands, had been bound with a towel, and he got loose, and he started struggling with Atkins, who started stabbing him, and then he made his way to the front door onto the porch, and the Tex caught up with them and struck him over the head with the gun multiple times, stabbed him repeatedly, and shot him twice. And the gun's right grip broke in the process, and this is very important later on. We'll come back to that. So then inside the house, Abigail Folger had escaped from Krenwinkel. She ran out the bedroom door to the pool area. Krenwinkel chased and caught her, stabbed her, and then finally she was killed by Watson, and they stabbed her a total of 28 times. And then as Frykowski struggled across the lawn, Watson murdered him with a final flurry of stabbing, and he was stabbed a total of 51 times.
Yeah, his poor body was a... Oh,
Right.
Yeah,
those
So,
pictures are horrifying.
Yeah, I know. You ever see the real pictures
Yeah,
there,
they're
the
not-
unedited pictures?
You will never unsee them.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
terrifying.
Especially Sharon. It's like,
Oh, God.
Yeah, it's very terrifying.
I'm surprised they didn't include the baby in the body count. They always say
Yeah.
5.
Yeah, see, that's
but
I wanted to talk
8
about
months
that.
old.
We're going to
I
get
don't
to
know,
that.
man.
I have to
That's a
see
person.
that. Yeah, so at that point, Sharon Tate was pleading to live and say she wanted to live long enough just to have her baby born because, she's 8 months pregnant.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And she offered herself as a hostage, but, they actually thought about it for a second. But Tex said no. Charlie said to kill
Charlie said
everyone.
kill everybody,
Right.
yeah.
So they ended up stabbing her 16 times. And Tex Watson later wrote that Tate cried, "Mother, mother," as she was being killed. But then, using the towel that they had tied Frykowski up, Susan Atkins wrote "pig" on the front door in Tate's blood. Hey, welcome back live from Dennis's house. And now we're going to get to the next night. That was August 9th, 1969. The next night, August 10th, 1969. The LaBianca house, 3301 Waverly Drive. So that night, Leslie Van Houten, Steve, Clem Grogan, Tex, Susan, Patricia, Linda, Charlie went with them to show them how to do it this time. And he picked the house randomly. They drove around, and it wasn't
Weren't they at a
really
party?
random. Yes, they were at a party at the house next door like a year ago.
Right.
So then he actually went inside this time, and he tied them up first. And then he came out and he said, "All right, you guys go in and finish off the job here." So Watson, Krenwinkel, and Van Houten went in, and the others was sent off somewhere else. So Tex actually started killing the wife, Rosemary, with a bayonet. And then he started stabbing the husband, stabbed him 12 times with the bayonet.
She started to fight back, though.
Right. She was like, they tied a lamp around her
Yeah,
neck.
and she picked up the lamp and started swinging it at
Good
her.
for her.
Yeah, and she had a lot of superficial stab wounds from trying
Yeah,
to
the
fight
defensive
them off.
wounds, yeah.
Yep. So then Tex Watson then carved war on the man's stomach, Lino. And then Krenwinkel and Van Houten stabbed Rosemary a total of 41 times. Can you imagine this scene? This is outrageous. So then Watson cleaned off the bayonet and he took a shower in the house. And Krenwinkel wrote Rise and Death to Piggies on the walls and Helter Skelter on the refrigerator door.
And she misspelled
it. She's a dumbass. Should have stayed in school. And none of this would have happened. So
spell check.
Yeah. Hey, welcome back live from Dennis's house. Now we're going to take a time to talk about the investigation here. So they've just had these 3 horrific murders, right? There was the shooting of Latza Papa, Gary Hinman, blood written on the wall, right? Then you had 5 people slaughtered, 2 people slaughtered, blood written on the walls. Different things. The LAPD is so incompetent, they didn't put it all together. They didn't realize these 3 were related at all.
They assumed they were copycats.
They didn't even find the LaBianca scene until later, though. That's why. Like, that was the one that really kind of, where they were like, okay, these 3 are definitely
But it's the next
connected.
night, yeah. No, they didn't for the longest time, because they had 2 sets of detectives, one working on Tate, one working on LaBianca. They didn't share any information, right? And then that gun that we were talking to, the famous 22 bunt line with the broken handle, they threw it down a ravine where a little kid found it, gave it to his father. The father gave it to the police. They had it for the longest time. They just put it in the thing. They said, nothing. So this guy heard about these murders, all this stuff going on, and eventually he called and said, you sure? He called a couple times. He says, can you just check that gun out? You know, there's something up with it, you know? And they're like,
conscientious
experiment.
Gun schmud. We find them all the time.
Don't bother us. Yeah, right? August 16th, 1969, the police raided Spahn Ranch and they arrested Manson and the family because they thought it was an auto theft ring. Right. Nothing to do with this at all, right? Mm-hmm. So they ended up getting released because it was a bad warrant. So time goes on. They still have no idea who committed these crimes. No suspects, nothing. So it's October now, and they raid Barker Ranch because the family had moved down to Barker Ranch in Death Valley at this time. So they're arrested this time for vandalizing earth-moving equipment, right? So they find Manson hiding under a sink. There's a little vanity this big.
He's a little man.
He's only a little guy.
He's hiding there,
right?
My
friend Rocky under this sink.
So, and then finally, when I turned the sink on,
my friend Charlie was here.
So the big break in the case came when Susan Atkins was in jail at this point, and she confessed to her cellmates, Ronnie Howard, who was not Opie, a different Ronnie Howard, and Virginia Graham. Virginia Graham was a big, as they say back in the 50s. She was like sleeping with Frank Sinatra and all these people. Now she's in jail. Elderly hooker. So anyway.
The best kind, really.
Half price. So anyway, she confessed, and then they ended up ratting her out. And in December 1969, that's a few months later, right, from August, and they end up arresting them all on this murder. And that's when we get to the trial, which started in June 1970 and lasted for 9 months into 1971. And the prosecutor, of course, was Vincent Bugliosi. How do you pronounce that? Bugliosi, whatever. So that I firmly believe that there's no way he could have convicted him in today's time and climate and political correctness, because there was so much
circumstantial.
It was all circumstantial.
They couldn't really tie him directly to any of the murder scenes.
Well, everyone would have security cameras now. They would be able to follow them all over town.
But when I was watching like the OJ trial and stuff now, how he got off with, they basically had a video of him and he got off for circumstantial stuff. And did you know, I bet you did not know, that Bugliosi was cited for, what do they call that when you lie in court? Perjury. He was indicted on perjury in this case because he lied about some evidence that he gave to somebody or something. And the most important thing that would have clearly made a mistrial is that Nixon, who was president at the time, went on the news and declared Manson guilty, right? So Manson, being a devious genius that he was, got a copy of the newspaper, and he stands up in front of the jury with the newspaper that says, Nixon says Manson guilty, right? And it would have been a mistrial at least right now. It probably would have sent them free. There would be Charlie's Lives Matters rioting in the street, but it was just
half the country would have shaved their head instead of just the girls.
And the judge said, don't worry about it. And
nobody listens to him anyway.
I do have to say though that Charlie I have to go on record as saying he's the most badass guy of all time. I'm going to tell you why. Because when he came into court, he had an X carved on his forehead and eventually turned it into a swastika, as opposed to any of these badass rappers who come into court now and they're wearing a suit and oh, yes, sir. You know, yo, G, what's up? What's up? Oh, yes, ma'am. You know, and they completely straighten up.
They put on their Eddie Murphy white guy.
Exactly. As soon as you're in court, that tells you how badass you are. So, you know, he
well, the girls even followed suit with that the next day. They all came in with the X's.
Yeah, and shaved their heads.
And
that was like terrifying. Seeing the girls with shaved
that's not a good look on chicks.
Singing and stuff.
Yeah.
You know, it's like really creepy and stuff.
Holding hands.
You know, so sociopath versus psychopath. I think, you know, he was clearly a sociopath, and I think you become a psychopath once you start killing people. And I think you can be born a sociopath, but if you have a good life, go on, you'll just, you know, be a pain in the neck, really, but you won't.
You'll just
use people being a jerk, you know, and stuff like that.
Well, sociopath's just really a lack of empathy for other humans.
And you know, you manipulate and you learn to do that because you have no real feelings and things. Right. So, but it turns to
politicians.
All politicians and every politician is a sociopath.
You kind of have to be
because you have to be
level.
Because you have no feelings inside, and you just want to strive to get more and more stuff.
You step on whoever you have to.
Don't care about anybody.
To clog up the empty hole inside of you. So,
Dr. Dennis Mitchell.
Yes. So, and then, like I said, once it goes back to this, if he would have become a rock star, he wouldn't have killed anybody.
That's true.
It would have just been, you know,
well, you wonder
you should hope not.
Right. Unless somebody forced him or his hand or something, but he wouldn't have gone out of his way to do it.
But you got to wonder too, with his childhood, the whole nature nurture thing. If his mother wasn't a huge chunk of garbage.
Yeah.
Like if he was actually raised in a loving family from the get-go, you wonder if he would have gone this way.
Absolutely not. You know, definitely. You saw that Eddie Murphy movie, right? Trading Places. That proved it right there.
I like to refer you to the documentary Trading Places.
Yeah, so the trial wrapped up in 1971. They hoodwinked and railroaded everybody, and everybody was found guilty. And they were all sentenced to death. But California abolished the death penalty the next year, so everybody was turned into life sentences. And then automatically they're up for parole, and they keep going to parole every year.
Parole, like 50
Charlie
times.
doesn't even attend half of it.
Right, he stopped going now.
I'm just not going to go.
So let's talk about this album for a minute. We got to smell the album at least.
Very cool. Yeah.
This album came out, this was recorded Charlie's demos, and it came out during the trial to raise money, and they told some guy, I forget who it was, to press 2,000 copies and sell them, and we'll use that money to pay for the lawyers and stuff. So Squeaky was in charge of that. Squeaky held the whole family together while everybody was incarcerated.
Wasn't it recorded like on a mobile truck out at the ranch? That's what I heard.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Like it was.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, I heard they sent a mobile recording truck out.
So they pressed 2,000 copies, but no record stores would sell it. No head shops. Nobody wanted any part to do with a mass murderer.
With that super sexy cover, they didn't want to put that right in their window.
Exactly.
The first pressings were worth a ridiculous amount of money.
They thought that the guy.
I
I saw it online. This is not the first. It was $500 at least.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
So they thought the guy was stealing it, that he was selling them and keeping the money for himself. So Squeaky went to visit him and was going to kill him, and he's like, "No,
you don't want to visit from anybody in that family."
We were talking about that just before. That he said that he was thinking about and looking
trying
into
to look for,
get in contact with Squeaky.
I wanted. She lives in upstate New York, so I was like, "Oh, somehow we have to find her and get a radio interview. That would be great." But he said, "Yeah, that's all I need." Is Lynette
you want to be on her radar,
knocking on my door.
Because I saw it. You know, all right, let's talk about her, where she is now. She kept the family together after everybody was in jail, and then she went on in 75 or so to try and assassinate Gerald Ford. She wore this freaky red witches thing, and she came up, but the gun misfired, and she's like saying to the Secret Service agents after wrestling her to the ground, "Can you believe the gun misfired?"
Of all the luck.
So she spent many years in jail, and she was released in 2009, and she went to live upstate New York. And I saw a clip recently that like Extra Hollywood or whatever caught up with her in the Walmart parking lot, and she's getting out of the car. Soon as she sees him, she runs after them, swatting at them, going
swinging
crazy,
at them.
swinging. And then she has this biker boyfriend who comes after them, and they're like, these people are going to be killed, right? So I said, yes, I don't want any contact.
A little dangerous.
To me, she looks like the scariest one of them all. She looks really scary.
An unbalanced woman.
So,
she's the only one who's held loyalty to him.
Right.
She still hasn't distanced herself from the family, really.
So let's say where they are now. Bobby Beausoleil, he's serving life sentence in Oregon State Penitentiary. He still continues to make music. He was actually a good musician, and he played on the first Frank Zappa Mother's album.
Really?
Freak Out, yes. Mary Bruner, she's assumed name living in the Midwest somewhere. Bruce Davis, he's incarcerated at the California Men's Colony in San Luis Obispo. We just mentioned Squeaky. Clem was released in 1985. Linda Kasabian moved to New Hampshire, had a kid, was arrested for drugs, but never served any time. Patricia Krenwinkel, she's in the California Institute for Women at Frontera, serving a full life sentence. She's having a full life as well. She plays volleyball and she gives dance lessons.
She enjoys long walks in the yard.
And pina coladas. So you go on Match.com.
Ooh, she's cute.
Yeah, I never understood that. People. Oh, there. We'll get to that in a second.
Oh, yeah.
Susan Atkins died in 2009 of a brain cancer. Leslie Van Houten, she's also at the California Institute for Women, and she was almost paroled, but got reversed. Tex, in 1993, he was moved to Mule Creek State Prison in Ione, California.
That's a fun place.
He's gotten married, and through conjugal visits, he's the father now of 3 boys and 1 girl with his wife, Kristen. However, California no longer allows conjugal visits for prisoners convicted of murder. That's a pretty good plan, right? Don't you think?
Yeah.
So, you'll have nothing and like it.
Yes. So anyway,
you lose.
And Charlie, of course, the best. I'm going on record saying this too: the best serial killer of all time. Will we all agree on that?
The serial killer
I
who
think he's a mass murderer,
no one.
and he really killed no one.
He killed no one.
Ted Bundy's got him beat.
Yeah, that was boring. That stuff was boring. Nobody. This whole thing, the hippies, the Beatles. Celebrities. It was if it was a movie, nobody would believe it. Exactly.
Celebrities,
so anyway,
murder.
Charlie's in Corcoran Prison in California, and he's gotten into trouble because he was caught with a cell phone. Imagine that. Charlie calls you on the cell phone.
That's the phone interview we need.
Yeah, right. Oh my God.
Just calling
it's very hard to do,
numbers.
but I would imagine that. You go to interview Charlie, you're waiting in a small room, and he walks in through the door.
Oh my
imagine
God,
that. Even though he's 80 years old.
Still
I'd still be terrified. Yeah, right. So, and he was almost killed. A fellow prisoner poured lighter fluid on him and set him on fire, and he had like 3rd-degree burns.
Well, didn't Geraldo have a great interview with him?
Yeah. Tom
great.
Snyder.
And he's like, I make laws, and he starts waving his hands.
Yeah, he's still just total
out of his
bat
mind.
poop crazy.
And and that's it. He's next up for parole when he'll be 92 years old.
I say at that point, let's let him
go.
Let's just enjoy his presence
Can he
in
stay
the
in
world.
your house?
Let him just
sure,
do
92. I feel like I can
TV
take
segments
him.
and stuff. Yeah.
All right, let's smell the album as we wrap this up. So now, go out and buy this album. Lie. It's very disjointed. It's not as quality as you would expect. But me and Sarah recorded Helter Skelter and Look at Your Game Girl, which was also recorded by Guns N' Roses. So now we're gonna wrap this up and we're gonna play Helter Skelter by the Beatles and Look at Your Game Girl by Guns N' Roses.